Hi, my name's Chords. I'm a producer at RAM, and I'm going to show you through my new tune with Jaguar Skills called Lust. I'm going to start with the drums. Okay, so here's the project file. I like to keep things organised. I like to colour coordinate things and keep my groups separate, like the groups that I'm going to have as the final mixing groups. It's good to have buses rather than have your whole track together. I think it's best to have groups that fit together and then mix them together and then mix those groups as submixes. The first thing I want to talk about is organisation of your drums. Here's just my main drum group is the kick and snare and other little breaky bits down here. It's really important that when you layer your drums, if you do layer, you don't always have to layer. Sometimes you can go in and just split up a break properly. I like to layer to get different sounds on top of each other. It's really important that you make sure the sounds sync on top of each other. So the hits of, say, these three snares, like one's a snare, one's a rim shot, and one's like a wide rip shot. It's really important that they fit together, like right down on the phase level, like right down to the samples. Because if they don't fit together, you get a kind of flammed sound, and you don't always want that. Sometimes you do want that, but you don't always want that. Yeah, so if I'll play a little bit first. Yeah, so you've got your drums here. Yeah, so you've got the drums here, and then a short little break, and a little amen that comes in as a kind of fill. It's very basic, it's a very basic beat, comprised of a drum kick from another track of mine. Double layers. The second one is a kind of ghost kick, a bit lower. A snare from a track of mine, which is just really shortly cut. I like to cut my drums really short, and you may notice there's a fade out, but the fade out slightly curved. I like to have it slightly curved because I think it sounds more analog. I think it like kind of cuts it off in a kind of pushed way, which I like on the sound of my drum. So it keeps the fullness of the whole sound, and then it cuts more abruptly at the end rather than a gradual fade out, like a more linear grader. Really short rim shot, which just adds something lower than the like kind of fundamental of the snare, as well as like a top crack, and then a really wide rim shot, really pushed. Yeah, so that's those drums together. Yeah, so I have a main group for my drums which are processed together, and then I have a percussion group down here, which is all the other splashy stuff which fills in most of the break and gives it groove. It's really important that when you link all this stuff together, make sure it's all on time and zoomed in, unless you want it to be wide. On this I wanted everything to be bang on time, but it doesn't always have to be. On these groups I've used the flex time on Logic. It's a feature of loads of DAWs now. To zoom in and get stuff right on time, you can click on the quantize here and it quantizes it to 16s. Or yeah, that's basically it. Sometimes I move stuff slightly forward or slightly back to get you move it slightly forward to get a kind of hastened sound on, say, a shaker, or make it slightly late to get a kind of relaxed swing. Depends on how you want to make a drum beat. Yeah. As for percussion, it's kind of basic. I've got this kind of groove called a Shogun groove, which is just a shaky kind of Asian hat. Then something from another track, a wide kind of open hat. And then something that layers with that in order to fill in all the space in between the main hits. It's funny how much of a difference that makes, because you listen to a main hit, the main kick and snare, and you get kind of not much happening. And then as soon as you get those little hats inside, you've got a more grooving, driving sound. I tend to layer a whole break underneath a lot of drums, because how those drums are originally recorded in that funk break, for example, this one's the Explore break, it has a certain reverb and a certain drive in it that fills in the space and makes your drums fit together better, I think, before you get into compression and adding a bit of reverb and all that stuff. So this time it's the Explore break. Some hats, top hats. I'll run through the processing after. Tambourine and a shaker, widely spread. That's it, because it just, as well as spreading the stereo field, it also creates a bit of space in the middle for your main hits and other stuff. Percussion loop, another break that only comes in on the 16. And that final break. Down here I've got some other stuff for the build up. Just a snare track of 909 snares that builds up. Risers, lifters, all kinds of stuff. A big splash of white noise just for the drop. Yeah, and those are the finished drums there. Very basic drums, there's not much going on. The song is relatively simple. There's a lot of space in it for the vocal, because the vocal very much cuts through. It's a very clear, very good vocal, and it drives the whole song. So you just got to let it go. Don't cloud it. Right, now onto processing. When it comes to the drums here, I like to use a mixture of like kind of the clinical plugs, like the EQ and Fab Filter Pro Q. It's one of the best out there, but on this one I seem to only use the channel EQ. And some analog modelling plugs, because I like the way they sound. They EQ in a very different way to the parametric EQs and the kind of more digital EQs. And I like that, and I like the gain stages. They do something nice to the sound. On this, it's really heavily, the kick was very light and bottom end, so it's very heavily pushed at 50 Hertz, and a bit of top end, 3K. There's a little bit of an envelope on here, just to give it a little bit more attack and cut the release a bit short. Because when you boost loads at the bottom end, obviously you get a kind of woof, and you want to keep that minimal, because of course it will clash with your bass. A lot of people go in to have their kick at around 100, but I've always liked having a lower kick that really messes with the sub range, and then dip the sub out using some kind of sidechain compression or just volume automation or something like that, because I like that sound. I like having a low thump kick. For some tunes it does sound better to have a higher kick, have a kick at 100, and it gives you complete space to have a long bass, but sometimes I just like to go much lower. Snare. On the short snare, there shouldn't be too much. It should just be at the fundamental. The fundamental is higher than the normal 200 on this tune. It's it's around 300. I think it's about 260, 250, something like that. Yeah, it's like right in the middle, 240, 250. Yeah, a big boost on that, and a big boost right at the very, very top end at 10 kilohertz. The rim shot is probably, yeah, taken out right at the very bottom, and then its fundamental hits around 100, 200. That's very low. Like it's unusual, these drums. They seem to work together pretty well like that. Yeah, on my finishing bus here for the group, there's a API plugin here. I love this API stuff. It has a certain crunch at the top, which is really, really great. If you want to get some sort of like, if you really want something to cut through around 2K, 1K, that area, these plugins are really good for that. And you don't have to turn up, you don't have to gain too much to get the effect of them coming through. It also kind of, the Waves one and this one, it kind of has a soft limiting kind of thing going on where it cuts everything above 0 dB. So I always keep my groups in check. It kind of just cuts it off at the top, and then as it starts to break up, as your sound goes over that, it breaks up in a really nice way right up into its distortion. So it's really good for that. This is really pushing up the bottom end, well, the very, very bottom end, a bit around the snare fundamental and like the crack of the snare in the middle. I don't know if you can hear it if I take it out. Yeah, adds something there. Just before that is SSL compression, very lightly chopping off the top end of the group, and just like adding a bit of a splash to the sound in a way. It's doing very little, but yeah, very quick release. For this, a relatively slow attack. Yeah, just to add a little something to the drums, and it makes them, that kind of thing, you process and you start using it while you've got other layers on, like my bass, for example. I think I did it with the synths, because the synths were quite large in this mix. So I think I mixed it in like that. See, it sounds so much duller without. It's all about getting the sound you want, because you want half a good mix that is technically a good mix, but you also want it to have the kind of sound that you want. You want your sound print on it. You want your character in it. So that's that. As for the percussion's fairly simple. It's mostly taking away like rogue frequencies in the top end, like these 6 floor breaks, something missing up there. Yeah, just dropped out something that was obviously peaking in between the kick and the snares. There's a slight noise gate on it because, as I said before, the break has a lot of space in it from when it was originally recorded, and I compress it a lot to squash it in between, to emphasise that and squash it in between my main drum hits, as well as one of these is probably a side chain to cut out. Yeah, so that's cutting out from the snare, my main snare. So you only get the tail of this, and the transients of the break and my snare don't clash. Yeah, this noise gate is just reining in some of that. See? So that's like the original break. It's just reins in some of that splash on the top. That's like some of the noise that's in the break. Let's keep everything clean. This splashy hats thing had a lot of like kind of rogue peaks in it, so I just reined in a bit of the real like kind of crunch, so it's a bit smoother at the top. Yeah, and everything else is really basic, just low cut, sorry. Everything on the bottom end, a bit more noise gating on some of these breaks. And that's essentially it. Same thing on the group bus on SSL compressor. Doing a bit more this time, just reining in, because the high end of these sounds sometimes goes a bit rogue. API, this is probably cutting out a lot of the low, yeah, it cuts out all of the bottom end here. Sometimes I pull it in around 4K, because 4K is where a vocal sits. It's where you recognise people's like sibilants in their voices. So if you can cut some of that out in other sounds, then you can get a vocal that cuts through. You can hear all the consonants pop. You can hear everything a bit clearer. Yeah, so I've chopped some of that out there. And yeah, I think those are the finished drums. As I said, very simple. Just takes a lot of listening, just like fine tuning.